So, Star Trek Picard Season 3 just ended this morning, and I have watched all of it, and I was pretty impressed. I'm gonna jump right to the chase. I would say it's probably about an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it does do a lot of things good, and it retcons a couple of bad decisions by Kurtzman. I would immediately say Paramount, if you've got any brains, you should put Terry Metalis in charge. Um, I don't think your other shows are going to be as good as you think. I don't think you're going to get that same kind of buzz. Terry Metalis did something with this show in this one season that he was in charge of that all the rest of the Kurtzman Trek has failed. It captured the soul of Star Trek. It wasn't perfect. It still had a little bit of modernization stuff that, you know, we don't need swearing in Star Trek. We don't need to have modern era, like, right now how I'm saying like and stuff like that in the dialogue. But it did a good job in a lot of different things. So I'm going to break down my overall thoughts of it. First things first, the big standout is I loved seeing these ships. The Titan was great, although I wish it was brighter. And the Shrike, that was a ship. And I know that in the show they mentioned the bird. However, I immediately thought of the book series Hyperion, with the Shrike from that series being a four-armed mechanical monstrosity and being very jagged and edged and just being a killing machine. And the Shrike was great for that because it looked that way. It looked intense. It was scary, and it really put up you know a threat for the first chunk of the show. And the gravity weapon was pretty neat. Of course, having to get rid of it for a couple different reasons. The in plot one for the gravity well issue was one thing, but I had heard that this show was made on a little bit of a shoestring budget. But sometimes when you have restrictions, that's when you can have the best work pulled out. And with even if it had a lower budget than the first two seasons, it looked incredible, and it did a lot more to follow up the older Trek, the original, not the original series, but the Next Generation, and it felt like a real sequel. Whereas the other two seasons, I mean, come on, Mass Effect. So a lot of us have played it, and that first season was just Mass Effect with Star Trek. You know, but that being said, the fights, the ship fights, were incredible, and just that whole thing, great. Um, some of the other ships didn't get too long in their shots, but you did get to see different ships, different designs, and it wasn't just simply, oh, this is the same exact ship. And then the second thing was the antagonists, which I gotta say, probably my favorite villains in the Star Trek universe are the Dominion. I think that they probably are one of the biggest threats, although it was mostly resolved at the end of DS9. But having a rogue group of them that wanted to destroy the Federation, pretty neat. Um, with the Borg, it's a little awkward to see them work together, but in that sense, the Borg were using the outcast Dominion, I guess we could call them, to further their own goals, which is fine. It works, and um, but not precisely perfect. But I guess when they had enacted this backup plan, it was because the Borg were dying out and they wanted to win. So that was where it's kind of like a little bit iffy. I mean, I personally always wanted to see the Borg fighting the Dominion, but we'll have to wait and see if anything like that happens in the future. Um, the next thing is let's go down the characters. Um, First off, Picard actually starts acting like Picard and not being weak. He builds up his strength, and at one point, it's just straight up, it's Captain Picard all over again. William Riker, standout. He did a fantastic job. Then you had, pretty much the rest of the original cast from TNG in the show, and Data was great when he came back, and Worf was a knockout. He was one of the best characters in the show, and probably more humorous than it necessarily needed to be, but it was great. Um, and even making Rafi tolerable. Now there's a surprise. One of the legacy holdover characters from the Kurtzman Trek was actually likable for a change. So we got that going. The music was great, and it was pretty action packed. And then the plot line with Beverly and Jean Luc's son was very interesting, and probably around episode 5, I was beginning to suspect the Borg were behind it, and I'm glad that that wound up being the case, because it made a lot of sense. With that being said, the whole rewriting people's genetic codes using the anomaly in Picard seemed a little bit crazy, but it worked for the show for what it was. Again, not exactly perfect, but it was all right. But some of those scenes, like when the Borg just assimilates everyone who's under 25, which, let's stay away from real life politics, but it was very interesting. And then going to that museum and seeing the classic ships, great. And all the other little Easter eggs, if you're paying attention and if you're very, very well versed, you can catch a lot of them. I didn't catch every single one, including the one with not William Shatner, James T. Kirk's body apparently is also at Daystrom. You have to just like really be paying attention. I wasn't sitting there pausing it. I watched it on my phone rather than the TV, so that might be why I didn't catch it. But it was a good show. I highly suggest checking it out. And I highly suggest making some noise to have Paramount hear it, to maybe not go through with any more Kurtzman. We'll see how Section 31 goes and how Starfleet Academy goes, but I don't have high hopes for either show. STD was not a very good show, and I barely managed to get a few minutes into Strange New Worlds before I was like, yeah, I'm out. It just, those shows don't feel like real Trek. I know some people like them, but if you compare the some people who do like them versus all the people who don't like them, you're going to see there's a vastly disproportionate amount. And I feel like a lot of people who don't like the other new Trek might actually really enjoy Star Trek Picard Season 3. So that's my suggestion. If you like Star Trek, I would say check it out. It's not perfect, but it's certainly way better than everything else that's been coming out.